Everyone has some sort of recollection of learning about slavery, the Jim Crow laws, the Civil Rights Movement, and most recently, the Black Lives Matter movement. But for most people, they learn it passively, distantly. I believe that listening to conversations about what has happened in the past and what is happening currently is the best way to truly move forward, since the alternative has gotten us nowhere. My name is Jeremy Smalls, and I interviewed multiple people I knew that could bring various perspectives to shine on the same issues regarding race. Here are their stories.
My name is Daniel Williams. I'll go by PJ. I was born in Charlotte, North Carolina, but I was raised in Fort Mill, South Carolina. Yeah, I was raised in a predominantly white neighborhood, and I went to predominantly white schools. And sometimes I was even like the only like black guy in my class. So it was kind of like a little weird me being the only black kid in class, or sometimes being the only black kid in my block in my neighborhood. So it was kind of like difficult to like adjust certain things. I just always felt like I was always the outcast.
I went to school, 6 years in segregation. And the seventh year, which was the Beaufort Junior High School, that's when they desegregated the school system.
I went to an all black school at first, and then in the early 60s, the Supreme Court said that black kids and white kids could go to school. It wasn't made mandatory at the time, so my parents sent me to an all-white school, which was very difficult at first because I left the neighborhood school and had to catch the bus, and there was only like maybe 5 or 6 African Americans on the bus.
Actually, my kindergarten school was a Catholic school in Philadelphia. So I actually went, it wasn't like the full Catholic like uniform school, but it was in a Catholic church. So I went to school there. So by the time I actually got out of the 6th grade, I probably went to about 4 different schools. Because in Philadelphia where we live, you went to school for like 1 year, then you went to another school for like maybe 2 or 3 years, then you went to another school. So you got a lot of that experience, and I don't know if that was birthed out of desegregation or not.
I had an instance where I was on the bus, and I was always the last black kid off the bus. There's only like 6 of us on the bus, and I was the last. My stop was the last. I was the last black kid or African American kid on the bus, and a couple of guys that I knew, which they called me the N-word, and then they spit on me, for no reason. And I went home, and I knew if I said something to my parents, they were gonna go to the school or something. So I just kind of kept it to myself, because I said I'm gonna take care of this myself, and which I did the next morning. And I found out that once I challenged them, they kind of backed down, so they were just being a bully.
I know in high school, I was like real dark skin. Like that's like, cause like when I was like younger, I used to be like a brown skin, but then when I got older, my skin just got like a little darker. So like every time like back in middle school, whenever like we used to watch that movie Roots. Do you remember that movie Roots? We used to watch that, and I'd be the only black guy in class, and everyone would just like look at me weird and everything. That made me feel some type of way, because like they compared me to a slave, and like I didn't like that at all.
My story is a little bit twist, and I think it's something that subconsciously a lot of people of color experience too. I actually got a lot of racism from people of color. When I was growing up on the streets of Philadelphia, all of my brothers and I had nicknames. One of my brother was Fish, one of my brothers was Squid, and then my nickname was Blackie. Sounds really harsh. Seeing it today, it was kind of accepted back then, because like, oh, that's just a nickname. But when you hear that say, hey, Blackie, and you hear that enough, you begin to think that the color of your skin is not as valuable as other people that are different hues of color.
Well, as a kid coming up, I'll never forget in Grace Hill area, Clarendon, it was a Christmas morning, and the little kids, it was trailer parks on Clarendon Road, and the little kids, was out there, white kids, playing marble. So we came out and we went to playing, you know, marble with the little white kids. And the lady, the owner of the trailer park at that time, came out and she used the N-word, you know, that she didn't have those kind of folks on her, in her trailer park, and, you know, to get out of her trailer park. And, you know, I was a young kid. I was imagined between 10, 11, somewhere up in there, but I could feel the hurt of being rejected, you know, because of the color of my skin, even that. I mean, because it's something that I never forgotten, you know. The older I got, the more I found out that folks like that, they really was doing what they were doing out of ignorance. You know, it's not, when you understand God's creation, we're all the same. And the more we help each other, and the more we support one another, the more we advance as a people, as a nation.
I used that as fuel motivation, and I just started, you know, I just started loving myself more. I just started loving my skin more. I started loving, you know, like just the Black culture and just the Black history. I just started appreciating that like a lot more. And I just felt more, you know, confident about myself and my skin. And I just never went back ever since.
Seeing the racism kind of did something different in me. It made me to aspire to be something great in life. Oh, I'm gonna show them, you know, it didn't make me feel that I was less than or devalued. It was something in me that said, okay, I'm not gonna let you put me in this box or pigeonhole me. I wanna be greater, smarter, better, more intelligent. I wanna be a professional person. And in life, I'm gonna graduate from college, I'm gonna get my degree, and I'm gonna do something great in life, because I never wanted that stereotype to pigeonhole me. So there were many times that I would be in a room, and when I was working with projects and managing people, that I would be the only Black person in the room. And so again, you know my parents. I was not raised with a silver spoon in my mouth. I came from extremely humble beginnings, but I came from strong-willed parents. So I was like, okay, you know, I'm not going to be intimidated because I'm the only Black person in the room. I'm going to learn how to speak whatever languages of the day in this room. And then I will pivot and learn how to speak the language of the day when I'm with other people. But even people that have worked with me over the decades at Cigna will even say today, you never felt threatened coming in the room. No, because Marjorie and Fuzzy were my parents. And I always said, I had stubborn parents. You know, they didn't have this extreme college education. But they were not people that, yes, yes. No, we learned how to come and bring our authentic stuff in the room and feel value.
I've also witnessed times where, because we as Black people anticipate that there'll be racial, not necessarily animosity, but racial resistance to us. A lot of times I've witnessed times where we don't allow ourselves to be placed in situations out of fear that would occur. And in so doing, perhaps have denied themselves other opportunities that may not have existed.
I started out in semiconductor, in the semiconductor field, working at a company called Mostech. We built computer chips. I was on the assembly line working on the equipment. It's like a piece of equipment go down, I go and repair it. For the most part, the people that I worked with were really nice. I hung out with mostly white guys, because that's all that was there. You know, it's a little different being the only minority in the group. Me and my buddies used to have a saying, we're the only fly in a bowl of milk. You know, that's just our saying, and you know, it still is sometime in the field I'm in. And like when I went to overseas, I went to Taiwan for a year. To me, I blend right in, because I'm like, this is great, you know. And I had a white friend of mine that went with me, and he had a hard time struggling because he was no longer the majority. And he really struggled. And I'm like, I said, man, what's wrong? He said, well, I'm not used to being. I'm like, yeah, you're used to being a minority. the majority. Now you know how I feel in my own country.
But the whole thing is, people don't know, in the military is a melting pot. What I mean by a melting pot is you got brothers, sisters, white folks, Puerto Ricans, you got people everywhere coming into the service. All different nationalities coming into one, sort of like if you go play sports in another state or something.
I went up to, as we call it, E7, Sergeant First Class. And so that was a guy that's up there in the rank on the enlisted side, not on the officer side, so I was close to the top dog. And so that, being in charge, I made sure that all of my guys were treated the same, equal. I made sure that everybody was treated equally. Now, I'm gonna tell you one instance where we always have an officer working with us, and this officer was from West Virginia, and he didn't like blacks at all. How I found out is one day we was out in the field, and then the commander that's in charge of all of us, he came to me and said, Sergeant Daniels, I got something to tell you. I said, what's up, sir? He said, well, your LT quit on us. I said, quit on us, why? He said, well, he said he couldn't work with blacks. It was fine with us. I went and told the guys what happened. I said, look at, man, he's gone, and I told him the reason why, because there wasn't no need to lie to them, let them know. So there was racism in there that's probably still in the military, but if there is, we try to eliminate that because that ain't what we want. Well, I spent 20 years in the military. I did my first 3 years at Fort Campbell, Kentucky. And in fact, at Fort Campbell, Kentucky, I saw the Ku Klux Klan. I was afraid. I was just going out, hanging out, and I saw them. They used to have their rallies and stuff. Back then, they were covered up. Nowadays, you don't hear about that anymore. But back then, in the early 80s, they was actual live. And I was afraid. I went to visit a friend of mine, and I told him about it. I said, I'm not leaving y'all house till daylight, because I don't want to get caught out there.
But there's a lot of hatred, man. A lot of hatred, and you all are governing your country. You know, you're serving for your country. And you got to think about it. I went in the 80s, and as you know, and you read and you seen, our brothers coming home from World War I, II, you know, the Vietnam War, the Korean War, they were discriminalized and not even getting what they just dues to them. Well, it's still happening to today.
If you let the fact that you're being discriminated beat you down, it'll keep you down. You know, you have to take an attitude. It beat at me, but it didn't beat me down. And like I said, I've always used that to motivate me to be better. Even when I felt I was being unfair, I ignored that. I said, well, yeah, but if I was better at this, they wouldn't have an opportunity to say that. So I was going to disarm them from the opportunity, see? And I always had that attitude. You're not going to have that to say about me.
And in reality, I never thought I would see a black president. The night that he was elected, I was very proud. I called my mom and my dad because I knew how they would have felt. You know, it's just that we've come a long way. You know, we've come a long way. My next thing that I'd like to see, I'd like to be a woman president. Every other country has one or had one. You know, what's the problem? You know, all I want is, I don't care what your color is, what race you are, whether you're a male or female. If you can do the job and, you know, keep us safe and make us prosperous and keep us together, a leader, you know, not somebody that's going to play party and divide you. Because what they do now is they play on your prejudices, is what they do, and it let you chase shiny objects and not really look at the thing that's really going on in your life. Because if you look at it all, we all have the same thing in common. I want to be able to make a good living and have my kids go to a good school and have them prosper just like me and everybody else. I just want the same even playing field.
I would say for me, you know, with sharing my story a little bit about racism, and I believe this, I do see this happening in this generation, in your generation, but what I would love to see more is self-worth, drive, and ambition. I see some influencers in your community just saying, hey, I'm going to get it, I'm going to do it, But to me, they're the exception and not the rule. And what I would love to see is for this generation to be like I was when I was in elementary school, when, you know, people were calling me Blackie and people didn't think I would have any value to bring to the world, that you got to find it from within you to say, look, like my mother used to tell me, you better look in the mirror and tell yourself you love yourself.
The direction that we're heading in as a nation and as this world, you know, it's going to come a point, you know, that we're going to have to, you know, truly stand in the Word of God, because, I mean, evidence, this is evidence that, and the Word says this, when a nation turns against God, it falls. When a world turns against God, it falls.
I'm glad now that, like President Obama was the first black, we've got a lady in the Senate now. We're stepping up now, because once before, blacks couldn't do nothing. Now we have people coming in place, have power that can do a lot and makes the world better.
Well, I know like 50 years ago, around 50 years ago, Martin Luther King Jr. gave that speech, that I Have a Dream speech, that one day, you know, his iconic speech, you know, we will all be together, you know, be united, be equal together. But it just seems like 50 years later, not that much has changed besides, you know, us, you know, being in schools together and stuff like that. But we still get disrespected, we still get killed and everything. So I want 20, 30, 40, 50 years from now, everything would stop. Police brutality against African Americans would stop. The disrespect would stop. Because like we have phones now. We have all this social media now. Back then they didn't have social media. So like all the stuff that we saw, you know, those history videos, they probably leaving some stuff out because I know there was a lot more that was going on. But now we have phones and all the social media, and there's a lot of things that we see on camera on social media. And it's ugly. It really is ugly. So I don't want to see that 20, 30, 40, 50 years from now, especially, you know, when I have kids and grandkids. I don't want them to go through all the stuff that was going on, you know, a couple years ago. So that's what I want the world to be. I want the world to be a better place where, you know, I can feel safe, my family can feel safe, my friends can feel safe, and my kids can feel safe. My wife can feel like just everyone to feel safe, because I don't want, you know, I don't want any of them to just be, you know, leave home and think they don't make it back. I got arranged a funeral for them. I don't want that for them. So that's what I want the world to be like in the future.